Learning Plan 3 is complete. You've worked through Chapter 4 and Chapter 10, so now it's time to talk about your big first assessment. So I'm going to ask you to complete Exercise 1, the cell phone graphic. Make sure you use layers and proper naming techniques. You are going to be submitting your Illustrator file to this Dropbox by the start of class, or 8 a.m. next week, which happens to be September 15th. I have for you a rubric on this project, so we're going to take a look at it. And this is Project 1. It's worth 35 points. And some things that I'm going to be looking for are that you do create a graphic that represents a cell phone and has some detail. So it's not just going to be your iPhone in the off position, which is a black screen. It will be made up of multiple shapes and have detail to represent buttons, the screen, etc. Again, a reminder, use layers and naming techniques as we just discussed in Chapter 10. So you're going to get 5 points if you are organized with layers, and those layers, sublayers, and groups are properly named, and you can demonstrate the competencies of Chapter 10. I want you to arrange shapes to make them look clean and precise and manipulate objects on your own. I want your graphic to contain detail and show effort. Use techniques learned from Chapter 2, 3, 4, and of course 10. And just as a reminder, in Chapter 2, we learned about selecting objects, aligning objects to each other or to a key object. We learned about grouping and then working in isolation mode to change part of the group and how to arrange objects. Think about this alignment and distribution if you're doing app icons or keys, actual push buttons on your phone. Don't just guess that these squares are all lined up. Actually use Chapter 1 or 2 techniques of aligning objects and distributing them to get it right. Chapter 3, we learned about rectangles, rounded corners, ellipses, circles, polygons, stars, lines. We learned about the drawing modes, drawing inside and drawing behind. And then today we learned about editing and combining shapes and paths. So making some more complex shapes by working with easier shapes and building them. So we learned about cutting with the scissor tool that leaves an open path that we then joined when we made the curtain. We learned about the knife tool, using it kind of freeform to make a wavy cut, and using it in a straight line. And when you use the knife tool, it makes two closed shapes. We learned about taking a path, a stroke, putting a really thick stroke on it, like 20 points, and then telling it to outline the stroke and actually turning it into a shape. We learned about using the eraser tool, erasing in a straight line, and then we learned about creating a compound path, or a donut, if you will, stamping a shape out from the center. We also learned 2 ways of combining shapes in Chapter 4. We learned about the Shape Builder tool, and we learned about pathfinders and the 2 differences there. We also reshaped a path. We kind of took a single line and we bent it, and then we used the width tool to make it look more like a flame. So using all of these skills, your job is to make a graphic and resize it as needed. So if you're building it crazy big and not paying attention, it does need to fit on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. My in-person students will be printing, you guys will not be. So this is how you're going to earn your 35 points. I have put a document in here, cell phone examples from the past. Now this contains a gradient. That's something we have not learned yet. I don't expect this. If you end up figuring it out or you know it already, that's fine. But this can really be very simple. I don't want to scare you with some of these examples, but these are things that you probably have learned. So here's a little bit more simplistic one, perhaps, just using some shapes, but notice how everything is distributed equally. It looks perfect. They're in line with each other. The numbers are all centered. Again, there's a gradient here, but not to worry about that. Here's another example, and I included the layers panel here. Again, people are using the clipping mask to make everything fit to the screen, but I just want you to notice that this geocat is actually just wallpaper. It's an image. That wasn't created yet, but these app icons were. a rounded square, and then using different tools, you can create an awful lot of these. You'll be amazed how much you can do. And here's one more example with, and he chose to do the front and back. I only need the front with some detail on it. And here's the layers panel of this example. So using what you've learned in these 4 chapters, so chapter 2, 3, 4, and 10, you don't have to go beyond that. You don't have to do anything crazy. I am going to be literally grading you based on these points. So if the objects look detailed, if they're in alignment, if it looks like you gave it some real effort, you're going to do very well on this. So have fun with this. This is due next week. This is your piece of homework. Finally, we finally have some real big homework. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, that will be due by the start of class next week. So enjoy, have fun with it, and give yourself time to play around. And remember to name all your layers and sublayers. Have a great week.